Welcome to the Friday edition of Juan's World, and obviously I'm not in my kitchen. I'm just going to be sitting on my couch here for the cold open to tell you that for the next, I don't know how many umpty weeks, I'm going to be going through some of my photos of different parts of the world. So it's going to be a kind of travelogue. I'm going to show you wherever. I've lived in a lot of places and I've got photos of all those places. I started my life in Argentina, then my family moved to England, then to South Australia, then back to England, then the United States, then Argentina again, then England again, then China, Italy, Myanmar, and now Cambodia. Those are the places I've lived, but I've been to an awful lot more. Because when you live, for example, in Argentina, it's very easy to get not only around Argentina itself, that is to get to Patagonia, Tierra del Fuego, Mendoza, Jujuy, Iguazu, all those places inside Argentina, but it's also very easy to get to Chile, and then on to Easter Island, or Peru, Ecuador, Brazil, Uruguay, all of those places, and I've been to all of them. Or here in Cambodia, I can get to Vietnam, Thailand, Laos, China, Malaysia, Indonesia, and so forth. So I'm going to pick pretty much a location each time I do my videos. I'm not sure that I can do 2 a week because I'm just starting to teach a new course at the Royal University, and so I don't know if I'm going to have the time, but I'll try. And this is the way I'm going to do it. I'm not going to say, like, let's look at London, or even in Cambodia, let's look at Angkor. I mean, I might show you Angkor, but what I really want to show you are out of the way places that people don't normally think about going to when they go to a country. So, all right, well, I might give you Machu Picchu, but I'm much more interested in Cusco. From the point of view of going to a place and finding something special. Or I'm going to start today with England, and we're going to look at 2 places that are rarely even thought about. One of them is Otmoor, which is a large open moor, obviously, not far from Oxford. And the second is a village called West Wycombe, which had its heyday in the 18th century, and we'll look at those. So let's just get started and you'll get the idea. So here we are at the beginning of our journey, and I'm going to ask your indulgence a little bit for at least the first video, probably 2 or 3, because this is a new departure for me. I'm used to narrating my videos as I go, whereas what I'm doing here is I'm collecting some suitable photographs from different places and then adding a soundtrack afterwards. So let's begin here in the town of Beckley, which is just outside of Oxford to the northeast. And I stayed here for a month in a period when I was actually staying in England for about 6 months, trying to get visa and work papers to go to China. And I had some good friends who have this beautiful farmhouse here. And you can see this is the room that they gave me, and my desk is set up by the window. And then out of the window is this beautiful view of Otmoor. Now, Otmoor is quite famous. It's been unenclosed land for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years, and was finally drained because it was kind of swampy and low, and enclosed in the early part of the 19th century. And if you look at the map here, you can see where Otmoor is in relation to Oxford. And in the bottom right, you'll see that the light green of the main map turns into a darker green, and it says the Chiltern Hills. That's where we're going next. But for now, we're staying in this light green part, which is known as the Cotswold Hills. And the Cotswolds extend from Oxford pretty much due west all the way into Gloucestershire. And they're noted for a number of things, included Cotswold stone. And that's what we're going to focus on for the most part. And we're going to explore the general idea that people who live in these different regional areas understand, which is that until the 19th century, people built their environments out of what they had to hand. So that if you lived in the Cotswolds, you used Cotswold stone. And so the oldest villages in the Cotswold Hills have this honey-colored, beautiful stone. It's also the stone that was used to build the colleges of Oxford for centuries and centuries. And it's very distinctive. So before I get into that in more detail, let me just show you a close-up of Otmoor, and you can see that it's ringed around by a series of villages that include Oddington and Fencott and Charlton on Otmoor and so forth. And if you're up for it, as I was when I started taking these photos, this was in the year 2014, the year I moved to China. And I had not a whole lot to do most days, and so what I did was I walked the circuit around Otmoor, which is about 10 miles, which, you know, I mean, I'm fairly fit, and I could have done that in maybe about 3 or 4 hours. But I was taking a lot of photos, and I was enjoying the environment, and actually, as it happens, one of my very old and dearest friends, and also a colleague and co-author, lives in Oddington and saw me walking around. I don't know how he managed to see me, but he just saw me and came running after me and said, "Oh, come in," and so I, you know, sat down with him and we talked about old times and so forth, and then got going. So I spent pretty much all day. I left late in the morning, I guess, and I walked right around the entire moor. Well, starting in Beckley, we'll see just how particular the stonework is. And I'm going to show you a series of walls and buildings and so forth. Also notice that there's a church in the village. Every village has a church. And unlike in most parts of the world, and also not like in some parts of England, but in this part of England, the churches are open all the time, 24 hours a day, so that if you want to go in and take photos and so forth, you can. And I'll show you one along the way. I went into pretty much every church all around the outskirts of Otmoor. Now, Otmoor is not really traversable anymore. It used to be, but there is a Royal Artillery firing range there now, and Sometimes when they're not firing, you can go through, but most of the time they're doing something or other, and so you can't. But right through the middle is a Roman road, and its name on the maps is Roman Road. Now, when you skirt around, you'll see that all of the buildings in all of the villages all around are pretty much made of the same stone. They're not all the same style by any means. A lot of them have thatch, but a lot of people don't like thatch because you have to keep replacing it, not very often. I'm not sure exactly how often, but you have to keep repairing it, and it's a professional job done by people called, surprise, surprise, thatchers. And you have to get the reeds from places like Norfolk. So it's a bit of a job. Whereas if you replace the thatch with tile or with slate or some other material that doesn't have to be replaced all the time, then you can do it with local materials. But going back to that idea of local materials, if you know about French cooking, you'll understand the concept of terroir. And a terroir means eating the food that comes from the land where you are. So if you want, let's say, mutton, or lamb, you don't just go to the supermarket, you go to a butcher who has local lambs or local cows or local chickens or whatever, because that means that they're eating the grass, the foliage, the stuff that grows out of the ground, out of terroir. The buildings are made of the stuff that's in the ground. Everything is all integrated, and that's my real point for today. So we can move into a church for a spell. That's what I used to do. I would be tramping for maybe a mile and then say, oh, up ahead there's a nice church. Okay, we'll go there and take some photos and have a nice sit down. And these buildings are always very cool. The very thick stone walls, and not much light gets in because of the stained glass. So there's filtered light, and you can look around and take photos and sit in a pew and just contemplate your life in general. So I wandered all the way around. I took a little bit of a shortcut towards the end because it was starting to get dark. And the moor is beautiful as it gets dark, or at least it was beautiful in those days. I believe this was August and the weather was really glorious. Didn't have any rain for days and days, blue skies. And at night, wonderful red sunsets. And those sunsets just burnish the Cotswold stone in a very particular diagnostic way. So I finally tramped home. I don't remember what time it was, but it was pretty late, and enjoyed the sun going down, the moon coming up, the whole environment just feeling like cozy and contented, and for a whole month here, I was just ecstatic to be in a place that had so much integrity in the stone, in the food, in the people, and so forth. Although that changed a little bit because all these beautiful old Cotswold stone thatch cottages now cost millions and millions of pounds, so that the people that live in these places have a lot of money. And in the old days, of course, they would be farmers. I mean, they wouldn't be poor. The farm workers wouldn't live in these buildings. They'd live in their own small cottages called tide cottages. But they would be part of the environment. There are no Cotswold farmers living here anymore. But there are still farmers working here, and the people that I was staying with, or at least the man in the couple, had been a farmer all of his life, and so had his father and grandfather before him. So that was really delightful. So now let's move to West Wycombe. Now, as you saw in the previous map, the Chiltern Hills are to the east of Oxford, towards London. And if you see on this map, there is High Wycombe, more or less, in between London and Oxford. And West Wycombe, not surprisingly, is to the west of High Wycombe. This is the area of the Chiltern Hills, and they are steep chalk hills interspersed with clay vales. Also very good farming land, also good timberland and whatnot. We'll see in a little bit about how picturesque it is. But let's start with West Wycombe itself. High Wycombe has been a centre of commerce for a very long time, and West Wycombe has always been a rather small village to the west, really insignificant, but it's been around for a long time, and there are still plenty of traces, as you can see here, of medieval buildings in the town. But it came under the squireship of Sir Francis Dashwood in the 18th century, and a squireship means that he basically owned the property, and everyone in the village worked for him. And he set about just building and making everything magnificent, starting with his own country home. If you know the novels of Jane Austen, for example, you know that everybody in the 18th century that had piles and piles of money, the propertied class, would have their places to stay in London, where they went during what's called the season, which would be the months when people didn't want to go out much. And then for various reasons, including at some points the plague, people would abandon London and go to their country houses. And Francis Dashwood built a country house here, and it's typical 18th century style. Wandered around it for a little bit when I was visiting. But I'm also interested in how just the general buildings were constructed at that time, and this is very diagnostic of the whole of the Chiltern Hills, including where I used to live. I used to live in a town called Burnham in the very south of Buckinghamshire. It's where I went to my secondary school and did my sixth form work before I went to Oxford. And the absolutely characteristic building material here is flint, and you can see it in this building. It's flint mixed with mortar or cement to form a building material, with the outer structure being made of brick. So you've got really two choices. You can build entirely in brick, and brick, of course, is made from clay, and this is in the Thames River Valley where clay is plentiful, and there are plenty of brickworks here. Or you can intersperse the brick with flint, and my village was exactly the same. The church there was an entirely flint church, and the flint, people used to think that the flint was just something that grew out of the ground, because farmers every year, and every single year, the first thing they would do when they plowed is go over the fields and pick up all the flint. And it could be used for paving roads, for buildings, all manner of things. It's characteristic, and so very, very different from Cotswold stone. I mean, you know that you've moved from the Cotswolds to the Chilterns when you've moved from that lush orange-yellow stone to the grey, flinty red brick Chiltern area. And the nice thing about West Wycombe is that Francis Dashwood made it not just his country home, but made it spectacularly landscaped. I'm not sure who landscaped it, and I can't really show you all of the artificial ponds and rivers and so forth, all fed from the River Ray, which runs through West Wycombe. But the idea, which sadly has been lost, is that you lay down a landscape that may not mature for 50 years or even 100 years, but you set it in motion because you don't think everything has to be done yesterday. So that's how West Wycombe looks. I don't remember, let me just check my files here, whether I went in. The last thing that I almost forgot. We went into the church, and right at the entrance to the church are these things, and you won't know what they are unless you're English. These are bell pulls. There's every old church in England has a ring of bells, and it could be any number. It could be 5, 6, 8, 10, 12. And on a Sunday morning, when everybody's getting ready to go to church, you'll hear bing bong bing bong bing bong bing bong bing ding bong bing bong. It all sounds so utterly random. What they're doing is they're ringing in rounds, and they start off just going up the scale, so that they'll start with the treble bell and then on up until they get to the bass bell. So bum 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 bum. It's called rounds. I used to be a bell ringer for a while, but didn't keep it up. Then what happens is that they start forming the different combinations. So instead of it going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever, they'll say 2, 1, 3, 4, 5, 2, 3, 1. 2. It's called combinatorics in mathematics. It means that you go through every possible change or the combinatoric variant from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, or however many bells you've got. Let's just say 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That you go all the way around, and so then it becomes 2, 1, 3, 4, 5, 3, 2, 1, and on and on. It's called ringing the changes, and a complete peal gets you all the way from the start to the finish without ever repeating. That's the real complicated part. And you have to have a judge there who listens to make sure that you didn't repeat anything that you've already done. So like if for example you did 2, 3, 1, 4, 5 and you do it again, then the bell referee says, sorry, it doesn't count. And with a large number of bells, a full peal that is going from the start to finish can take 24 hours or longer, and so it's a big deal. And so this church has a plaque to say we did a peal. It's so hard to do, and all the names of the ringers and so forth are there. And it's something that everybody could be proud of for all of their lives. So that was West Wycombe. And at some point, I was with my friend from Beckley. We stopped at a pub and had lunch. And here this is my lunch. It's a poached duck egg on wild mushrooms and sourdough bread toast with a small sort of salady thing. Quite delicious. So I hope you've liked this beginning foray into my travelogues, and that you will tell your friends. Please like, it's very important. Please subscribe if you haven't. And I'll come back on Tuesday. I'm pretty sure, I have no idea where I'm going to go with it, because these two I just happen to pop up in my memories on Facebook, so I can't honestly say. It could be it could be somewhere in Peru, or could be in Vietnam, I don't know. But have a good weekend.